The Cavaliers lose to the Hawks. Big news for the Pacers. It cost them a first-round pick this year, but may not all be bad. I'll break it all down and what it means for the Pacers. Plus, what are the key offseason dates you as a fan need to know to track this Pacers offseason in full from start to finish? We'll break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News. And today, we're going to continue our parade of this show being a Cavaliers podcast because the Cavs lose to the Hawks Friday. The Cavs miss the playoffs, which has huge ramifications for the Pacers this offseason, next offseason, and going forward. So the Cavs keep their first-round pick. It doesn't go to the Pacers this year, and that Caris LeVert trade will break it all down. And then we'll walk through the offseason dates that are key for the Pacers this year. Free agency dates, team option dates, draft dates that are important for you as a fan to know, to me, to set the scene for their entire offseason and why the order of operations ends up mattering. I always think that show is very helpful for people to illustrate everything the Pacers will have to do this offseason, as well as why the order of operations matters. But the big news in Pacerland comes last Friday. Cavs-Hawks, huge game for the Pacers. Obviously, if the Cavs win at home, they make the playoffs as the 8th seed, and the Pacers either get the 16th or 17th pick in the first round this year. If they lose, they don't make the playoffs, and the Pacers don't get that pick. It stays with Cleveland, and the Cavs hold a 10-point lead at halftime, and then Trae Young had the most monstrous second half ever. He finished with 38-9. The Cavs' offense fell apart, and the Cavs lose that game at home, 107-101. No playoffs for the Cavs as they blow that lead, and no first-round pick for the Pacers this year. We'll talk about that pick. I don't think the sky is as falling as much as people want to say. Now, the ironic part of this, I don't want to get into the whole game this time because, last time I talked about Cavs Nets in more details because how the Cavs played in that game was important for their second playing game. It doesn't matter. They don't play again. So I'm not going to rehash this game in general. I did find it ironic that Caris LeVert, the guy that the Cavs traded for and really turned to be helpful, went 5 for 13 from the field in this game and wasn't quite the force they needed him to be when it mattered. If Caris LeVert had a good game, the Pacers might have ultimately kept their first-round pick in a stroke of irony, but it doesn't work out that way for the Pacers. They lose the pick this year. It would have been great for them as the Pacers to get 16 or 17 and 31, basically as good as that trade could have gone, but that's not the case. So what now? Well, now the Cavs have the 14th pick this year. The Pacers still have that pick obligation from the Cavs as a 2023 first-round pick that is also lottery protected. And then if the Cavs somehow keep it again, despite their good year this year, it turns into 2 second-round picks, a Cavaliers second in 2025 and a Lakers second in 2026. So look, next year, you have to imagine a couple things. When you look at the East, you'd think the Cavs would get better, right? Garland was a young all-star. Jared Allen was a young all-star. Evan Mobley will only get better. They now have this 14th pick in theory. We'll talk about that in a second. LeVert will have an offseason to develop with these guys. Colin Sexton will return. Okoro will get older. Like, they were a young team, and they were still right there. So, in theory, the Pacers are like, yeah, whatever. The odds that they make the playoffs next year are still pretty good. That said, this can all change so quickly because the reason the Pacers didn't end up getting this pick, you can boil it down to a lot of things. But the Cavs blew it against the Bulls down the stretch, right? The Cavs beat the Bulls last December, and then they played the Bulls 3 times in the year 2022, and they lost all 3. And 2 of those came with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley injured. And I picked the Bulls out specifically because the Cavs finished 2 wins behind the Bulls. If they win even one of those games, they win the tiebreaker over Chicago, and they're in the playoffs. So the reason that this pick, despite the Cavs looking like a team that could grow into the playoffs next year, is still a little precarious is because it just takes one injury like that to an all-star in Jared Allen or a talented rookie in Evan Mobley for the Pacers to once again be sweating out if they're going to get this first rounder from the Cavs at some point, right? So that's what makes lottery protection a scary thing for the Pacers and why this asset is what it is. And the other factor in this is as much as I think the Cavs are going to get better, if you look at the East, like is Miami going away? Is Boston or Milwaukee or Philly or Toronto or Chicago or Brooklyn or Atlanta, the 8 teams ahead of them, none of them project like they're going to get worse. So it's still a tough field next year to sneak in to the East playoffs for the Cavs. So it's still a little risky. So obviously the Pacers would have preferred if the Cavs beat the Hawks. That does not take a rocket scientist to understand that the Pacers would have loved to get cap relief and 16 or 17 and 31 and a future second for LeVert in a second. That said, let me cut you off. Frustrated fan. So one, the cap relief part, 31 and a future second, is still a good short-term return, assuming the Pacers get something with this Cavs pick going forward. Okay. So I don't think the trade is like all of a sudden a dismal deal because I've seen a lot of people being like, this was a terrible trade from Kevin Pritchard to not negotiate these protections. I still think it's good. And if they would have changed the protections, they probably couldn't have made the trade, and 31 is still solid here. So one, still a decent thing. And two, I think a factor in this that is fascinating is, yeah, the Cavs are going to pick 14, and maybe they get someone good. But if you're Cleveland, you are in next season is their last year where Darius Garland is cheap, right? And then after that, he's going to be really expensive because he's going to be a max player. And then not long after that, Evan Mobley's going to be expensive. And oh, by the way, they're going to have to pay Colin Sexton and Jared Allen. They would probably like to be able to have a ton of assets to make a trade for someone else really good to make their team better at some point in the future. And so this 14th pick is, of course, really huge for them. But because they don't have their 2023 first rounder now, the Pacers own it, protected, they now, if you're Cleveland, you cannot trade your 2023 first or your 2024 first because the Stepien rule says you can't trade first round picks 2 years in a row. They can't trade a first until 2025 now. It's 2022 right now, right? So that is something probably not very appealing to the Cavs. And again, the Cavs probably thought they were going to be trading their first this year when they made the deal. If they could have foreseen Jared Allen and Evan Mobley getting hurt, they probably don't trade for Caris LeVert. So the Cavs, to me, this is something that happens in the NBA sometimes. The Heat and Thunder did it this season. You can trade away you can alter protections on a pick in a trade, right? And it's hard to explain the reasoning for why, like the Heat and Thunder, when they did it earlier this season, KZ Okpala went to the Thunder, and then a second round pick went to the Heat, and then the Thunder changed some protections on a Heat pick, which allowed the Heat to trade other picks, right? So the Heat and Thunder amended protections on a Miami first-round pick going to OKC in 2023 and pushed it back to 2025, but made the protections unprotected that year so that now the Heat could have traded a 2023 or 2024 or 2027 first. They only could have done like two firsts otherwise. That was very confusing. But to say, with the right assets, you can convince a team to change protections. And the Cavs, maybe they love someone in this draft and they want to pick 14, but maybe they want to have the option of trading the 2023 and 2024 first in this coming season in the last year where Garland is cheap. So I don't think it's crazy that the Pacers could send something to Cleveland. Maybe not something good. Maybe like a not pick 31 the Pacers have. That'd be really good for the Cavs to get, but like maybe a future second, like that's like mediocre that the Pacers have. Like they have a Jazz second really far off and a Heat second out there, something in the mid-second round to Cleveland, and then they axe the protections and just send it now. That is legal, and that is something I think Cleveland might consider. I don't know if they would do it because maybe they just want to nail this pick now and have the cheap rookie scale guy and just hope that it all works out for them in the future. But I can see them wanting to be able to trade two assets this coming season instead of just one. And if they get it, maybe they get a pick in this coming draft that they like. Who knows? There's a lot of ways this could go. So I would not say all hope is lost yet. Now, the Cavs would not do that till after the lottery, just in case they jump from 14 into the top four. But I don't think it's crazy that the Cavs would consider something like that. Maybe that's too Pacers-colored glasses-y, but for them to get the trade obligation completely done and then be able to trade two extra picks instead of just being hung over a barrel, that seems like something that could be appealing to the Cavs. So one, I would not say it's all doom and gloom for the Pacers. They could still end up with 14 if they can agree to something like that with Cleveland. That might make sense for both parties. Another factor that I think kind of is working in the Pacers' favor, they can now trade this Cavs pick, right? Maybe they trade the Cavs. Let's just pretend it's got value about the 22nd pick, right? If you imagine that's where it was. That's where the Cavs would have picked right when they made the trade for LeVert. So let's say they're about as good next year and injuries don't hurt them as much. It's about worth the 22nd pick. Is that plus 31 that the Pacers have this year, that future Cavs pick, enough to get the Pacers like 20 or 19 in this upcoming draft, right? Would Minnesota want to do that? Would Chicago want to do that? Get a future first and still a good pick if you're in a team about to be expensive like Chicago? Maybe, right? Maybe. So that's still an option for the Pacers here. They could still use it productively, right? They still have the asset, even though they don't get the pick now when it would have been as good as possible, which is the best case scenario. I'm not saying the Pacers are better off now, but I am saying they still have a lot of options that make this valuable. The final factor I would like everyone to consider is from a team building macro perspective. You're the Pacers, and you have Halliburton, Duarte, Isaiah Jackson, top 9 pick this year, and 31 this year. That's 5 super young guys. And the Pacers, on the record, said they don't want to be a rebuilding team next year that's super bad. So if you're the Pacers and you have next year Halliburton in year 3, Duarte in year 2, Isaiah Jackson in year 2, and then 3 top 31 picks, how do you do that and try to be good? Especially when eventually all that stuff will get expensive at the same time. Having the timeline change slightly could be macro sense good for the Pacers, and having a delay on that pick could actually be better in terms of managing minutes for young guys and building a rotation next year that actually makes sense. So there, look, I'm talking about all the things that are now on the table for the Pacers because they did not get the pick. It is obviously devastating for the Pacers that they did not get almost the highest possible return in this trade, which would have been cap relief and a near lottery pick and the best possible second rounder. They were close to getting that, which would have been the dream for them. That is the best case scenario. That is now off the table, unless the Cavs do something similar next year. But they still have a lot of options that are available. It's not doom and gloom completely. And I think a lot of flexibility options will still be good for them. Sorry, my cat is yelling. She wants to get out of the room. So I would say that what the Pacers do now is a fascinating thing still. And we'll continually be tracking it here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Now, let's talk about the key offseason dates and also something else that happened in the play-in tournament. So something else that happened in the play-in tournament is the Pelicans made the playoffs. They snuck in as the 9th seed in the West as well. And that means the Charlotte Hornets now have the 15th pick in this draft from the Devontae Graham sign-and trade they made last summer. And that is the final play-in tournament fallout thing I want to talk about, because the Hornets, long connected to Miles Turner, their defense has been a joke for forever. If they finally want to be good, they're going to have to trade for some center that's good eventually. Rashawn Holmes has been long connected than Miles Turner has. Now the Hornets have PJ Washington, the 15th pick, their own pick in the top third in the lottery, right? James Bouknight. Just another piece of ammo for them if they eventually want to trade for Turner. I thought that was noteworthy. I don't know if it's necessarily like a fait accompli thing that they will trade for Turner, but they have tried many times in the last couple of years, and having more ammo, certainly something that I thought was noteworthy. Whereas if the Clippers had beaten the Pelicans, that pick would have gone to the Portland Trailblazers. So that is it for the play-in tournament fallout for the Pacers. Let's talk about these key dates the Pacers will be facing this offseason now that all the games that matter for the Pacers this season are over. They don't really care what happens in the playoffs. Nothing about their pick situation changes. And without the lottery done, we don't know where all those picks are. So let's talk about the key offseason dates for the Pacers. Before we do that, I want to talk about two things first. First up, the great folks over at AG1, a new partner here with the Locked On Network. I've been using almost every day AG1 Athletic Greens. It's helping me a lot because in the morning I didn't really have time to be healthy, but it's helped me with my gut health. It's giving me more energy every day. I don't have to drink as much coffee. It's helped my immune system. It is fantastic. I've been doing it for about a month now. And what is AG1? What am I talking about right now? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you would absorb 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to start your day off perfectly. Right? I take it every day, one scoop right in the water bottle that comes with it. Just mix it up. It takes 2 seconds. It's got like this nice tropical taste. My girlfriend really likes it too, and she has it. It takes it easy for me to take it to work every day. Just slap it in the car. It's wonderful. It's lifestyle friendly. If you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it's perfect. No nasty chemicals, no artificial anything, and it still tastes good. Their founder was tired of spending a bunch of money on gut health every month, so he made this for you and I. It's perfect. Right now is the time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. One scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. Make it easy. Athletic Greens is going to give you free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do, visit athleticgreens.com/NBA network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NBA network to take ownership of your health and pick the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Let's also talk about the good folks over at Built Bar who are making the best tasting protein bars ever. They're basically candy bars. And that is the problem with protein bars that you buy in a store. They're chalky. They're really dusty for some reason. They're rubbery. They don't taste good, and they don't taste like what they say they taste like. Built Bars, on the other hand, 100% covered in chocolate, super soft and easy to chew, tastes like a candy bar, but is super healthy and great for the health-conscious person. They're all low calorie and high protein. They all come in awesome flavors. I love the peanut butter brownie. The mint variety is really popular. The puff varieties with marshmallow in them are popular. There's cinnamony ones that are really good. Coconut, banana cream pie. They're all awesome. Their texture matches their flavor. You can see all the macros for Built Bar on their website. Most of them have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. You got to try them yourself. Go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. That promo code again is LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Thank you, everybody, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. Gotta advise Locked On now to get the local in-depth angle on every playoff game from our local hosts here at the Locked On Podcast Network. We're covering all the action for every team as the playoffs commence. Wow. Has it been a fun first weekend of NBA playoff action, despite Pacers fans wishing the Cavaliers were in there. So now it's over. The games that the Pacers care about are all done for this season. Pacers fans can root for whoever they want in the playoffs. I'll actually do a guide to the playoffs from a Pacers perspective later this week. But it's off-season mode. We talked a little bit about this on mailbag stuff last week, and we'll talk about it in much more detail this week and especially next week. But there's a lot of key dates the Pacers have to keep an eye on this offseason, and one of them would have been today had the Cavs won on Friday. This one's not super important for the Pacers, but it's still something that matters. So we'll just go chronologically. I was thinking about sorting these by like free agency or draft or team building, but it's not worth it. It's easier to go chronologically. Today, the 18th of April, is when the NBA is going to break the ties in the draft order. So teams that finish with the same record, coin flip determines who picks first, who picks second. The team that loses the coin flip gets the worst first-round pick, but the better second-round pick. Again, totally not relevant for the Pacers, who have no ties with any of the picks they will have. They would have had a tie with the Cavs and Nets had the Cavs won on Friday, but the Cavs lost. So that is the first date. If it's all playoff teams that are tied, maybe Chicago would be more receptive to the package I made up in the first segment. If they finish at 19 instead of 18, they're tied with Minnesota. Maybe Denver would be interested in the thing I said. They're 20 or 21. I guess it could matter for the Pacers, but that is the first thing that happens. The other date that is this week, the 24th of April, is the last day for players to enter the draft or submit their name in as an entrant. I mean, most of them have already done so. Even like Trace Jackson Davis from IU already did. A lot of the overseas guys have, but there'll be a few more that trickle in this week that have not officially done so. And if you love a prospect that hasn't yet, that is when it happens. That's it for April, really, though. The rest of April and a lot of May dates are just playoff games. But the two noteworthy May dates for the Pacers and Pacers fans to keep an eye on, May 16th through 22nd, that is the NBA Draft Combine. So that is when all the guys that are highly touted by teams, they all get invited to this draft combine. And that is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. One, you get official measurements on players and you can see them all competing in the same setting, which is, if you're a fan or if you're a franchise, that's obviously important information. Two, though, all the execs in the NBA are in the same place, right? So that is when some buzz heats up about various moves or trade chatter heats up, or you start to get a little bit of information, in my seat or in media seats in general about what teams might be thinking or strategizing doing in the offseason. So that is I think that's about a month from now, when we'll start to see some plans from other teams sort of materialize, and maybe that impacts the Pacers, maybe it doesn't, but that's when that stuff will come up. And while that draft lottery is happening, the other key May date for the Pacers, May 17th, everyone's favorite thing this offseason, the draft lottery. Yes, that is potentially the biggest day for the Pacers offseason and one of their biggest days in a very long time. I won't get into the nitty-gritty too much here, but again, about 42% chance the Pacers move into the top four and about a 56% chance the Pacers fall backwards, with their most likely pick being 7, their expected value being 5, and basically a 50% chance they finish 6, 7, or 8. Yes, that's all very confusing. I'll send you a chart if you need more information on that. So that is the day that, if you have a lucky charm, or if you're Kevin Pritchard and you want to move up and you have a lucky charm, you make it happen that day. Who knows who the Pacers will send to the lottery for that, but I'll be fascinated to know. Next up is June 1st, the big offseason date. That is the early entrance withdrawal for prospects to go back to college. It's usually when the fringe guys who didn't get good feedback from NBA teams decide to go back to school. That's only for NCAA guys. Europe guys, that date is actually the 13th of June. But like for Trace Jackson Davis, for example, if he doesn't get good feedback from the pro level, perhaps he goes back to IU, deciding on that day. If you love a second-round prospect, and I have a few that I like, I talked about that on the Mailbag Show last Thursday that I highly advise you listen to. Travion Williams from Purdue, Blake Wesley, Notre Dame, Julian Champagne of St. John's. Those are some of my favorites as of now. That is the last date they can decide to go back to school. And the very next day, June 2nd, the final start, which isn't totally important for the Pacers necessarily. The last day it could end at least, is the 19th. And that is when every team is done, trade talk, bam, it's heating up again, right? And even before that, really, when there's only 2 teams left for all of June, is when that stuff can all heat up. Because once you're out, you can make moves again, right? The Pacers could, in theory, make a trade tomorrow. Will they? Absolutely not. But could they? Yeah. So that's when that stuff will really heat up, especially because the draft combine will already have passed. Free agency will only be in 2 weeks at that point, right? So as the finals dates are somewhat important. Once basketball is done on the 19th, the NBA basketball is done, excuse me. The 23rd is the NBA draft combine. Pacers obviously care a ton about that, but that is different from the excuse me, I shouldn't have typed draft combine there. I don't know how to type stuff apparently. That is that G League combine when the G Leaguers all get together, and a lot of those vets can try to vie back for the NBA. So yeah, and then the 29th is the big day for the offseason from a Pacers perspective, because that is the last day a lot of moves will happen in the current league year. That doesn't mean anything. That's a bunch of gobbledygook. But basically, that is the day that qualifying offers to restricted free agents are due, right? And maybe Nate Hinton will be a restricted free agent. I'm trying to get some clarity on that. But for the Pacers, that could only be O'Shea Brissett, Terry Taylor, Dwayne Washington. And it could end up being none of those guys, right? It would actually, I don't know. It would require the Pacers declining some team options for it to be any of those guys that are restricted free agents, but it's possible none of them are. It's possible the Pacers don't have to deal with that at all this summer. Like that last year, they had to deal with Cassius Stanley's restricted free agency. They would have been 1 year away from dealing with Aaron Holiday, but ended up trading him. They haven't had a restricted free agency fight in a while, basically since they extended Sabonis before it. So it's not a thing that the Pacers have had to deal with for a very long time, or at least in a meaningful way. They've had some lesser important players go through restricted free agency. But that's the last day they can send qualifying offers out and make a guy a restricted free agent. And I said that I think it makes more sense for them to make Brissett a restricted free agent. Ironically, and this is, again, good negotiation from Pacers in contract land, O'Shea Brissett's team option is that deadline is that same 29th day, right? So we'll learn a lot about how the Pacers feel about Brissett and what they want to do with his contract probably before that day, honestly, but that day at the latest is the last day. So remember, if you don't know, to update you there, if the Pacers pick up O'Shea Brissett's team option, he'll be on a minimum contract next season, which is great, nice and cheap. But then after the 2022-23 season ends, he would become an unrestricted free agent, free to sign with any team. But if the Pacers decline his team option, O'Shea Brissett would become a restricted free agent this offseason, meaning the Pacers would have match rights and could guarantee that he's on the team next year if they really want to keep him around, and they could get him to a longer deal at that time. I think that makes more sense. Guarantee you have a quality young player on a nice contract for the next couple seasons. He's only 23, right? Turns 24 soonish this summer, but that's right on the timeline with Duarte and Halliburton and Jackson and whatever other young guys the Pacers like. It seems like that is someone they would want to have around. So that's a key date for the Pacers in that way. And of course, Nate Hinton could be involved there. And then 6:30, that is the last day of the current league year. That is, when extensions can be done for expiring guys this season, right? So Ricky Rubio, TJ Warren, if the Pacers want to extend them for some reason, that's the last day they could do it. But at that stage, that stuff never happens because they could just wait a day and sign as free agents with the Pacers or any team. But that is technically the last day that stuff is legal. But then again, on June 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, free agency reopens up. Teams are allowed to sign guys, or at least begin negotiations is the legal term. They can't actually put pen to paper yet at that stage. So that's when you'll hear all the signings start leaking in. I'll, of course, do a podcast that night. So that's all the stuff for the current league year. What's up with next league year, July and onwards, as they head into the 2022-23 season? Let's talk about that stuff. But first, really quick, let's talk about the good folks over at BetOnline.net, your number one source for all your sports betting stats and sports information. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball, all over at BetOnline.net. They've got tonight's game between the Mavs and Jazz. No Luka, only a 205.5 over under. The first game was well below that, but it seems like better shot making will be coming for both teams in that game at some point. I mean, a lot of key players shot very poorly. Rudy Gobert shot one time. It seems like a higher scoring game is coming, if you ask me, but you can make your own decisions over at BetOnline.net, your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and more. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is where the game starts. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. Locked On NBA for all the latest and greatest news around the NBA as the playoffs are in full swing. Jackson Gatlin, our Monday host, will take you through and around the league the last key dates for the Pacers this offseason from July onward. So technically that counts as next season. From July 1st through July 5th is the moratorium. That's when the NBA figures out their calendar their finances for the year, so they can figure out what the salary cap is, and that's obviously huge for the Pacers, who could have a ton of cap space for the coming year and do projections and things like that. And players can negotiate with teams but can't actually sign until that's over, except for minimum players and two-way guys. If you remember, Dwayne Washington signed July 1st last year, right? The Pacers keyed in on him as a two-way guy. They wanted right after the draft. Kiefer Sykes signed, I think, on the 3rd, right? Stuff like that. So that stuff will happen when it does, but that is a moratorium. And then on the 6th, that's when that ends and all the players can sign their contracts officially. And the 6th is also when the calendar starts for restricted guys, right? For their if you sign a restricted player, there's 48 hours for the other team to match that deal. That calendar starts ticking on the 6th, which could be relevant, for like a guy like Miles Bridges, or if the Pacers go after any restricted free agent, that could be relevant. Although Herb Simon has obviously spoken his thoughts about restricted free agency and wanting to, not screw other teams. That seems unlikely after they traded for Brogdon, but not impossible. After that, free agency will be in full swing. Pacers will sign their guys. The order of operations will matter there. From the 7th through the 17th, that's when Summer League will be. I think Isaiah Jackson told us in his exit interview, I can't remember which player it was, but that he is playing in Summer League. So there'll be some obviously key figures for the Pacers playing in those games, whether that's two-way guys, but maybe Dwayne Washington and Terry Taylor play in that experience. A lot of young guys will try to get minutes there. Goga could have played, I thought maybe, but he'll be overseas in Georgia playing for his national team at that time. So Summer League's obviously key for the Pacers. Those young guys will get those reps. Maybe you will see whoever they draft will be playing there. That's always a fun time to get your first glimpse of the new guys and things like that. On the 8th of July, that's when, and this is another cap dork thing coming, Doug McDermott's trade exception. If you'll recall, the Pacers sent Doug McDermott to the Spurs in a sign and trade last offseason. The Pacers created about a $7.4 million trade exception in that deal. They have till the 8th of July to use it, to bring in a player in a trade who makes that much or less. But let me tell you something. If you go below the salary cap as a team, you lose all your trade exceptions. And the Pacers have one for McDermott, and they have one for Jeremy Lamb, and they have one from Edmund Sumner. I don't think they would want to lose those, so maybe they try to stay over the cap at first when the offseason starts, but they have till the 8th to use it. I'll go into those kind of decisions on a whole show because that is a very complicated thing to explain about staying over the cap versus going under. But either way, on the 8th, that is the last day they can use Doug McDermott trade exception that they got by trading with San Antonio last year. The 13th of July is the last day that a team can pull a qualifying offer. If you recall last year, the Pacers gave Cassius Stanley a qualifying offer. He played a little bit in Summer League, and then boop, they pulled it away. He couldn't sign it. He did not end up being with the Pacers at all this past season. Again, if they go through the restricted free agency dance with O'Shea Brissett, that's the last day they could pull it. I don't know why they would do that, but that is, for him at least, I don't know why they would do that. But that is the last day they can do that. If they give Nate Hinton a qualifying offer, they could pull it that day. Who knows? After that, though, it's basically just a free agency dance for a couple months. There's not a ton of dates in July. After that, most teams have their roster situation fully set. August 31st is the last day for a team to waive and stretch a player's contract. The Pacers, as of now, don't have anyone on their team that makes any sense to do that with. If they take on some bad money from another team in a way to acquire some assets, maybe they decide to do that, but I don't think they would, given that they just won 25 games. They'd probably just eat it for a season, but August 31st is the last day for that. October 6th, the Edmund Sumner trade exception from his deal to Brooklyn last summer expires. Same deal with the McDermott one. If the Pacers go under the cap and use cap space, that'll be gone well before October 6th, but that is the day that it would officially expire if the Pacers do decide to stay over the cap, and maybe they make a draft night trade and they can bring in players to those trade exceptions that I've described. But the dates I've said are the last day the Pacers would be able to use them. And the last two dates for the summer would deal with rookie stuff, right? So Goga, after being 3 years in the NBA, is eligible for a rookie extension, like Sabonis got a few years ago, as Miles Turner got after 3 years in his deal. Will Goga get one? I highly doubt it, but he is eligible for one. He can negotiate that with the Pacers all the way up until the day before the season starts. So we don't know the official Pacers schedule yet. It'll probably start around October 17th-ish. I have October 15th typed as the date for the last day of the extension for Goga Bitadze. If he gets one, he would have to have an unbelievable offseason in Georgia for them to even think about that to me. But that is the deadline for the Pacers and Goga to agree for something like that. Again, doesn't seem like something that will happen. And the final date, this isn't even in the offseason. Technically, next season will have started, but it is an offseason decision. Rookie option deadlines for Tyrese Halliburton's third season, Tyrese Halliburton's fourth season, Isaiah Jackson and Chris Duarte's third season. The Pacers will have to pick up those options a full season in advance. That's how the rookie scale contracts work. Spoiler alert, all of them will be picked up. There's no reason to decline them. And if you do decline them, you could get screwed, a la Jalen Smith and his deal with the Pacers right now. So that is all the dates to watch this offseason for the Pacers. We'll have more in-depth podcasts on all those decisions as those dates approach and come around, assuming they are worthy of a full show, which most of them are. So that is the Pacers offseason laid out for you start to finish. I highly recommend bookmarking this, referencing it, or just asking me or typing it all down yourself. I have it all written out in a way that's very digestible if you would like to see it. So I hope you all had a great weekend. And if you did celebrate, I hope you had a nice Easter and spent some time with some family. We'll be back tomorrow talking with a Pacers personality that I don't want to spoil just yet about the Pacers and the fever and rebuilding and what paths those teams are on. Should be super fun. Thank you all for listening. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.